There is no doubt that the Hebrews emerged from the Canaanites. Their languages are closely connected, and the territory overlaps. Early Greek writers...
Whoa, I did not know that. I did not know that Hebrews came from Canaan. What?
Frequently, the Greek mangling of the city's name also gave its name to the Greek word for a book, biblos, which became the English word for
Bible. What?
The majestic cedar.
This guy has been waiting for this for a long time, and
one of the most
I try to get
flags in the world.
Long videos out the way.
These trees at once covered the sides of the mountains of Lebanon like a wooden blanket, are the backbone of an ancient and glorious nation that once stretched the length of the Mediterranean and connects its people back through untold ages, a symbol of strength, longevity, and continuity. Since the time of the Bronze Age, the people of Lebanon have been at the forefront of civilization, some of the most ancient and continuously inhabited cities in the world, the origin of the alphabet used by billions of people, the largest Roman-era temple to Jupiter, Neoplatonist philosophers like Porphyry of Tyre, and their role in the formative years of Christianity under the Byzantines and the Crusader states. Lebanon is a religiously diverse place where Christians make up nearly 40% of the population.
Look at that map, bro.
People who have made such a large but often unrecognized contribution to world history and culture, who have stood and continue to stand and endure countless hardships, like the mighty cedar upon the mountains of that beautiful land, who are the Lebanese. While some in the West refer to everyone in the region as Muslim, as if that were a race, and others try to categorize people by skin color, both approaches fail in Lebanon.
Well, that's ultimately just a bad approach in general. It's funny because the West, more so American way of generalizing people based on their skin tone or like just overgeneralization. Yeah, that stems from slavery in America. I say slavery in America because nowhere else kind of did this, to be honest. Well, it did, but only America was like really bad to the point where it lingers on today. Yeah, that just comes from slavery. Americans just thought, not Americans, but the way how they would purposely distinguish people based on their skin color, yeah, it was just so they could see like who do we enslave and who do we not enslave, right? And this is where term black white would come from, literally, in a nutshell. I'm just oversimplifying because I don't really want to talk too much about this on the video about Lebanon. Yeah, you would literally see people who are clearly not black, by the way, who clearly have a completely different skin tone, by the way, that is not black, but we would still call them black. That's not the case. That overgeneralization was purposely coined because when people who had different shades of color came around, they were like, how do we go about this? What do we do? Oh, let's just call them black. Okay, problem solved, right? And this is how the term light skin, right? Because it's funny because in my country, I'm considered light skin because my country is mostly like dark skin, Afro descent people, but I'm mixed race Creole. If you are mixed and your skin isn't dark and your skin kind of has like a glow to it, right? Like my skin, we consider that light skin because, your skin is lighting up. No, Americans, no. Americans, right? They think light skin is basically a white guy with black features, like a white guy with black hair. They'll be like, oh, he's not white, he's black, but light skin. Again, and that overgeneralization is there on purpose because when the plantation class was trying to figure out what to do with these mixed race people, they didn't want to accept that these predominant white people were essentially white, they didn't want to accept that. And they wanted an excuse to enslave as much people as they could have. So they put the whitest of the white, right? The whitest as you can get. Basically white, predominantly white. And they say, oh, yeah, you're black. You're black. Even though you're predominantly... The amount of predominant white people that I see who be going around saying, like, the N-word, I'm like, bro, you like, I know you have black in you, but you're not black enough for you to be saying that. You're basically white, bro. I'm sorry. Like, I'm predominantly Afro, right? I have at least, like, I'm gonna go take a DNA test soon, but I'm very aware of my ancestors. I'm predominantly Afro, but I have a good chunk of European and a little bit of Indian genes inside of me. So, but still, look, I'm mixed. Like, I'm an actual mixed person, but still, bro. That's where that came from. That's where that generalization came from. And it annoys me that people should adhere to this. People everywhere, even, and it's spreading across the world. Okay, I see people calling me black. Like, if I'm some dark skin. Nothing against dark skin, but I'm seeing people, like, call me black. Like, if I'm a dark skin or something, like, it's supposed to insult me. And I'm, like, looking at my skin like, okay, boohoo, cry me a river, like, so yeah, that's where the whole stupid American generalization comes from, right? I'll talk about this in another video more in detail.
There are nearly as many Christians in Lebanon as Muslims, and the population can be classed as a Mediterranean one, with typical medium to olive skin tone. There are many Lebanese that can pass as Southern Europeans. Former American
the same region
presidential candidate Ralph Nader is 100% ethnically Lebanese, for instance. A 2017 genetic study published by the American Society of Human Genetics titled Continuity and Admixture in the Last 5 Millennia of Levantine History made a radical discovery. The modern Lebanese population is largely derived from the ancient Canaanites, those who would develop into the separate groups of Semitic languages such as Phoenician, Aramaic, and Hebrew. Though they would adopt the Arabic language during the Middle Ages, the present Lebanese population has direct and substantial continuity with the ancient Canaanites.
That's cool. And not surprising.
That about half of the ancient Canaanite population of Bronze Age Sidon was derived from Levant-related ancestry, local to the region since the Paleolithic. However, the decisive factor appears to have been a large migration of Chalcolithic Iranian ancestry from the region of the Zagros Mountains or the Armenian Plateau, probably somewhere between 4000 and 2500 BC. This ancestry has recently been found to have spread prehistorically to Cyprus, Crete, and the Peloponnese, and by the Middle Bronze Age to Sicily, likely representing Minoan or Mycenaean period migration from Crete. The influx of Iranian Chalcolithic ancestry has another curious twist. Its primary component is that of the Caucasus hunter-gatherers at around 63%. Iranian Chalcolithic ancestry was a significant contributor to the Akkadian and Babylonian populations as well, and made up 50% of the Bronze Age Canaanite ancestry. With that in mind, it's possible that this Iranian Chalcolithic ancestry represents Proto-Semitic speakers. The earliest recorded Semitic language is Akkadian at around 2500 BC, spoken throughout the northern Mesopotamia. Their language belonged to what is called the East Branch of Semitic, while the ancestor language of Canaanite and Aramaic was a northwestern branch. The region the Caucasus hunter-gatherers would have come from is not far from where the earliest Proto-Semitic language was recorded, and overlaps with the region where today the dwindling populations of Aramaic speakers live, in northern Syria, Iraq, Iran, and eastern Armenia.
Aramaic is still spoken? I thought Aramaic was an
not
extinct
far
language.
from the ancient city of Nimrod.
I thought Aramaic was long
Caucasus
extinct.
hunter-gatherer
I'm surprised it's
ancestry
still
also
around.
makes up almost half of what is identified as steppe pastoral ancestry, such as the Yamnaya. At some point, eastern hunter-gatherers living on the steppes north of the Caucasus mixed with this group, mostly taking on female lineages, and further studies are required to determine its exact origins. However, it potentially creates an ancient link between Semitic and Proto-Indo-European populations. It may explain why there appears to be some Semitic influences in Proto-Indo-European, unexplained cognate words and numbers like horn, goat, 7, grain, the word to trade, the word for an axe, the word for a bull, and numerous others seem to be cognate between Proto-Indo-European and Proto-Semitic. There are also some grammatical coincidences or possibly correspondences. This requires a separate investigation into this topic, but shows that Proto-Indo-Europeans likely at least had some type of interactions with early Semitic-speaking populations.
It makes sense because if you look at the origins of Indo-Europeans, originated from roughly around like the Kazakhstan area, the area north of India, like north of the Indian subcontinent, that region. Yeah, it's not really hard to see that contact would be made there. Plus,
they may have
climate was certainly bad.
Domesticated cows and goats from them. And potentially, the Caucasus hunter-gatherers are the link between Indo-European and Semitic. And they went on to form a significant core of the Canaanite, Akkadian, and Babylonian populations. Iranian Chalcolithic ancestry also appears in Saudi Arabia, in higher concentrations in the east than in the west, reflecting ancient migrations from Mesopotamia. It is perhaps in the realm of possibility that the ancient origins of the Semitic group of languages lies with the Caucasus hunter-gatherers.
What the hell? Bro, I've been reacting to so much stuff on languages, bro. This is so much information.
The modern Lebanese population has some steppe-derived admixture that wasn't present in the early Bronze Age samples, seemingly around 7%. The mixing event is thought to be dated to the Middle Bronze Age or to the early Iron Age. Iranian migrations, Armenian migrations, or even Greek migrations could be an explanation. The name for the country is truly ancient, coming from the Proto-Semitic word Laban, meaning white, in reference to the snowy mountains in wintertime that so define the landscape of the country. Mount Lebanon is home to the last of the old-growth cedar forest.
Is it the video that he's showing?
And
I don't know why the quality is like that. I think this is a video that he's showing. It's just like that.
Canaanite Mediterranean Empire. And by 3300 BC, in the Levant, this was the time of the early Bronze Age. To the north of Lebanon, near Aleppo, in the Syrian Arab Republic, developed the Semitic kingdom of Ebla. To the east was the grand Sumerian city of Ur. Within the territory of modern Lebanon, the first houses of the city of Byblos, or Gebel, in Phoenician, were being set. By 3000 BC, trading relations with Egypt were already well established. The Egyptians recorded the city's name in hieroglyphics dating to 2600 BC.
Damn!
Making it one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the world.
Bro! Ha! Bro! Such advanced civilizations back then, bro. The more I look at this, the more I just think to myself, how much did we really lose? How much information did we lose? We call ourselves advanced, but how backward in time are we truly? I always wondered that, because we are 100% backwards in time. Like, we're progressing, but we have regressed. so many times. Way too many times. Too many times. I can name countless times where we have regressed. Like the Library of Alexandria. Although many historians say that, oh, the library was really that important now. Still, though, a bunch of information was lost there. The killing of, I can't pronounce his name, but the guy who was like, his last words were, "Do not touch that circle," and the Roman soldier went and killed him. You should know who I'm talking about, because everyone knows that's how he died. Do not touch that. Do not touch my circle, or do not touch that circle, or something. And the Roman soldier killed him, which is funny because they had orders to not kill him, but they killed him anyway. A whole bunch of wars where we just lost so much information, man. You know, that's just mad to me, though.
Boats crafted of the famous Lebanese timber were being built and exported to Egypt, and the Egyptians called any seagoing ship a gebel ship, named after the Lebanese city. The Greek mangling of the city's name also gave its name to the Greek word for a book, biblos, which became the English word for
Bible. What?
The book, because it was in Byblos, probably around 1200 BC, that the Phoenician script was invented, and which began advancing.
And you know what's even more crazy, actually? Byblos, bro, library in many languages. I know in many European languages, the name for library is biblioteca. Bro, that is mad.
Bookmaking technologies that would spread to Greece. From at least 2500 BC, Sidon in the south had also developed into a bustling commercial hub, exporting cedar, olive oil, and wine, while bringing in copper ore, some from Cyprus, but some came from as far as Britain. Tyre is perhaps older still, at 2700 BC. Its name comes from a Proto-Semitic word meaning rock, after the rock that it was built upon. It was visited in Greek times by Herodotus, who reported that the city's priests believed that it was first constructed as a walled palace upon the mainland, which they called Old Tyre. Even in ancient Greek times, the city was already ancient, and surprisingly,
even in ancient Greek times, the city was already ancient.
Dating
what the heck,
bro? Of it was close to the mark. During the later Bronze Age, the city-states of Lebanon became major commercial centers on the Mediterranean. They manufactured and exported glass, purple dye, metalwork, and textiles. In fact, the name Phoenicia is developed from the color of their purple dye. Besides Egypt, they traded extensively with the Minoans and the Mycenaeans. Their methods of shipbuilding also seem to have influenced Minoan and Mycenaean ship technology. Yet their connections may have gone beyond simple trade. The Canaanites were strong seafarers who not only built ships with their cedar, but put them to extensive use, fishing, trading, and colonizing. By 2000 BC, Iranian Chalcolithic ancestry begins to appear in Cyprus, Crete, the Peloponnese, and Greece generally, quite possibly brought by an early wave of Canaanite colonists. Cyprus would become heavily Canaanite and would remain linked to the Iron Age Phoenicians, but also serves as a test case for the blending that was occurring between Greeks and Canaanites, which influenced not only classical Greek culture, but Canaanite culture as well. When Mycenaean Greece was falling apart in 1200 BC, streams of Mycenaean migrants fled the country. One of their main known destinations was Cyprus, where a Mycenaean dialect of Greek, Arcado-Cypriot, survived into the historical period. This close cultural connection between Canaanites and Greeks is first evidenced in the earliest Greek writing, the Iliad. Not only was it composed using a modified form of the Phoenician script, but it contains many mythical elements that connect Greeks and Canaanites. Perhaps the most dramatic is that of the story of Europa, who was the daughter of the Phoenician king of Tyre. Zeus brought her to Crete in the form of a bull, and she was mother of at least 2 of the judges of the dead. Her name likely means the broad-faced one, and refers to the earth herself, but eventually the name becomes associated specifically with the continent that the Greeks dwelt on. It serves to explain the foundation of Crete, connecting Crete.
So that's where the name Europe comes from? I always used to wonder, where the hell did the name Europe comes from?
To the Phoenician.
Wow.
Which genetic studies suggest there was some truth to. The brother of Europa, Cadmus, becomes an ancient Greek hero who is credited with giving the Greeks the Phoenician alphabet and founding the city of Thebes, possibly reflecting real historic traditions of Canaanite settlements in Greece. The cult of Aphrodite is also strongly influenced by the Canaanite goddess Astarte, with some suggesting there may be even an etymological connection. Cyprus was one of Aphrodite's main cult centers and the focus of some of her oldest myths. The hero Melkart has many similarities with Heracles and was interpreted as Heracles by the Greeks and Phoenicians. The idea of calling the Strait of Gibraltar the Pillars of Heracles, and tales about the god's adventures in the far west, is likely derived from the importance of the cult of Melkart in the far west Phoenician colonies. But of course, the Canaanites also had strong ties and cultural affinity with all Semitic peoples, such as the Akkadians. They shared many of the same gods, they spoke related Semitic languages, and they served as merchants and intermediaries between trade on the Mediterranean and the dynamic markets of Babylon. Yet the geography of the region would play a decisive factor. Politically, the city-states of the Levant were increasingly being pinched between 2 larger powers, Egypt and the Hittites. Byblos was the front line in that political power divide. The Battle of Kadesh, an ancient Canaanite city now located on the borders of Lebanon and Syria, was emblematic of this fight for the domination of the region. It was said to have been the largest chariot battle in history.
We don't have much details on it? Damn, that's dude. Damn, bro.
The influence of Egypt is likewise preserved in the Old Testament, where a major narrative involves seeking liberation from the domination of the Pharaoh. That liberation would come, but in an unexpected way. The collapse of the Mediterranean Bronze Age and the coming of the Sea People.
Wait. So, but the Israelites were freed before the Bronze Age collapse, right? If I'm not
Now, there's much debate about exactly who the Sea People were, but there is little doubt that the invasion by these people recorded in Egyptian texts had a dramatic effect on the region. This Mediterranean raiding and colonizing, seemingly in part involving bands of Greeks, coupled with climate shifts that caused colder weather and droughts, brought chaos to the entire region and saw the downfall of the Hittites, the weakening of Egypt, and the disappearance of many other states. Mycenaeans colonized Cyprus during this period, and they may have also settled in parts of what is now Israel and Palestine, possibly the origins of the name Palaset, or Philistines, related to the people in Greek myth known as the Pelasgians.
I talked about this actually. I talked about this. Yeah, I talked about this in was it my a couple of videos ago. I think it was the Sufi warrior who protected Christians. It was in one of my recent videos where they talked about the word Philistine, and I pointed out that Philistine is the same as the word Palestine. So, yeah, those people were there for a long time too.
Possibly meaning the seamen. Such settlements may have also taken place in parts of Lebanon, and could account for some of the steppe ancestry possessed by the Lebanese population.
If you
Around 1200 BC, the states of the region began to tumble like sandcastles against the oncoming wave of history. It was a fate that the Canaanite city-states likewise suffered. Cities like Sidon, Tyre, Byblos, however, managed to escape the worst outcomes of the area. Though their trade networks had collapsed, their cities remained intact. They fortified and held strong, and by around 1000 BC, they were already re-establishing their trade links and growing again.
So where did the sea people go? Like, I know that they just randomly came out of nowhere, but like, why did they fade? Now that I think about it, I never heard the reason why they went away.
However, it was likely during this period that the major regional breaks in the Canaanite identity occurred. Those in the south, bordering Egypt, were beginning to develop their own separate tribal cult religion. This would eventually transform into the monotheism held by the Hebrews. There is no doubt that the Hebrews emerged from the Canaanites. Their languages are closely connected, and the territory overlaps. Early Greek writers...
Whoa, I did not know that. I did not know that Hebrews came from Canaan. What?
Frequently made no distinctions between them due to their similarities.
That's
However,
mad.
Regional differences had been developing and likely crystallized into a more identifiable form by 1000 BC. This can be seen in the archaeological record, with hilltop settlements appearing in the region of Israel-Palestine around 1200 BC, characterized by an absence of pig bones. However, pork was a staple food among the Canaanites, and its absence likely demonstrates the development of specific Hebraic customs. At least some of those customs seem to have been derived from the ancient Egyptians. Herodotus says, "The Phoenicians and the Syrians who dwell in Palestine confess themselves that they have learnt it from the Egyptians. These are the only races of men who practice circumcision, and these evidently practice it in the same manner as the Egyptians." This is possibly contrasted with the more northern Canaanites, who the Greeks had closer contact with, when Herodotus says, "I am not able to say which learnt from the other, for undoubtedly it is a most ancient custom, but that the other nations learnt it by intercourse with the Egyptians. This, among others, is to me a strong proof, namely that those of the Phoenicians who have intercourse with Hellas cease to follow the example of the Egyptians, and do not circumcise their children." Yet the Canaanites maintained close relations with the Hebrews. King Hiram of Tyre was said to have sent King David lumber and skilled carpenters to build David's palace in Jerusalem. He made an alliance with David's son, Solomon, and Lebanese cedar, gold, and craftsmen helped build the first temple. Thus, when Lebanon emerges into the Iron Age, the Canaanites and the Hebrews were already distinguishing themselves as separate, though still closely linked ethnic groups. These differences...
I still can't believe that Hebrews came from Canaanite. Bro, I always thought Hebrew was like their own distinct thing that had its own unique... Wow.
...become wider as the folk religion of the Hebrews took a purely monotheistic direction, and even led to hostility. In the north, the Canaanite cities of Sidon, Tyre, and Byblos were becoming ever more important in Mediterranean trade.
So Hebrews and Lebanese people are related. What? They're literally basically descendants of one. What? What the bruh?
It was around the 9th century when the Greeks began to use the Phoenician alphabet to maintain their own records. The terrible irony is that although we have vast amounts of Greek writing which survive, there are almost no records from the Phoenicians. They were writing extensively and compiling books, but almost everything was written on parchment, and due to having not been preserved over time, almost nothing survives. Yet what little does survive shows the vast influence that the Canaanites were having. The color of purple dye that they were famous for making.
So I had someone in my comments the other day when I point out the whole correlation between Palestine and the Philistine people, which if you pronounce it with a different accent, is Philistines. He told me that this region, Arabic, does not have a word that they don't pronounce P, which is weird. They don't pronounce P. He said, I'm pretty sure he said Arabic. He doesn't pronounce P. Is actually F. So P is always F. Makes a F sound. So Phoenician, I say this because I see the word purple and I think, wait, if I think that these people don't pronounce, P, they pronounce, P as F, I think of the word purple, then I'm thinking like furple, right? I'm like pronouncing that in my head. I'm like, oh wait, that kind of sounds like like in Phoenician, like furple, bro. That dude, the connections between all of this stuff is absolutely insane, dude. So much stuff to take in here. That's why I'm so quiet, to be honest, because I'm just sitting here trying to just process all of this info. It's mind-boggling.
Greeks don't refer to them as anything else, but they always distinguish them from the Assyrians and the Egyptians and mark them out as a distinct ethnic group. For instance, Herodotus informs us that the philosopher Thales of Miletos, one of the ancient Greek philosophers accounted one of the 7 pre-Socratics, was in fact of the Phoenician race. Likely they still called themselves Canaanites, as in the Bible they are typically identified by their city name or simply called Canaanites.
I didn't even know the Bible. I thought the Bible always. Wow.
See, the Phoenicians of Tyre founded the city of Carthage in a very advantageous location, within striking distance of the lucrative Sicily and their colonies in Sardinia and the Balearic Islands. It's currently situated near Tunis in Tunisia. It became the Phoenician power center in the Western Mediterranean, and eventually it would develop into a separate dialect and even language. Because of the dramatic political events that were to unfold in the Levant during the later Iron Age, Punic, the language of the Phoenicians of Carthage, would end up as the last bastion of the Phoenician language. From the 9th century to the 6th century BC, the Phoenicians had a golden age of prosperity and development. Yet the Levant, for all its appeal, had the drawback of being a relatively small strip of land, surrounded on all sides by larger powers. They were able to overcome this limitation through a focus on trade and colonization, but they were not an empire or even a single kingdom. Despite over 100 years of fierce resistance, by around 732, the entire region of the Levant would come under the control of the Assyrian Empire. Aramaic was likely established as a prestige language in the region at this time, as prominent factions in the empire were...
Hey, technically it is, because that's what Jesus spoke.
Though a more dramatic change would come later, with the invasion of Nebuchadnezzar II, who destroyed the first temple in Jerusalem, followed by a 13-year siege of the city of Tyre from 586 to 573. The Babylonians would establish Aramaic as the language of state, and though their rule was short, soon replaced by the Persians, the language policy remained the same. And when the swelling power of the Persians pushed against them in 539 BC, though they fought valiantly for several years, they could not hold it back. But they allowed them to maintain their autonomy, and they continued to flourish. The second deadly blow to the Phoenicians was delivered by Alexander the Great. In 332 BC, after months of brutal siege, Tyre fell to the Greeks. When Alexander was refused entrance to the Temple of Melkart, he had 2,000 of the leading citizens crucified. Likely in fear of this brutality.
Whoa, Alexander! damn. Like you know what's funny is that I reacted to the Siege 2 by my Alexander the Great series. Go check it out after this video. Like I was starting to realize after that episode that I reacted to that Alexander got a lot of anger issues, bruh. But damn.
The rest of the Canaanite cities surrendered. It marked the end of the Phoenician political independence and the beginning of the end for the Canaanite identity. Greek and Aramaic became the language of state and trade, and the Phoenician language went into steep decline.
Wow.
The population became heavily Hellenized, a process that continued after the conquest by the Romans, and its reorganization as part of the Roman province of Syria in 64 BC. Many of their unique religious customs and cultural elements continued, but the language likely died out around the 1st century AD. The same process was afflicting the Jews to the south. Hebrew, closely related to Phoenician, was in steep decline, relegated to the status of a liturgical and scholarly language, while Aramaic and Greek was a typical language of communication, trade, and state affairs. Aramaic was also the language of Jesus. The Bible records Jesus traveling to both Sidon and Tyre, and identified the people there as Canaanites. After the Roman conquest, several phases of political reorganization of the region took place. From 64 BC, it was administered as part of the province of Syria. But in AD 194, Septimius Severus established the province of Phoenike. This would last until the 630s. The city of Beirut, known by the Romans as Berytus, had previously been a small town, possibly existing since the Bronze Age. But under Roman patronage, it became an important center, home to a law school and the site of a Roman colony. Baalbek, still famous today for its wondrous surviving temple structures, received massive support from the Roman administration, who helped to build the largest temple to Jupiter, known locally as Baal, that existed anywhere in the Roman Empire. Many such massive projects were occurring across Lebanon under Roman rule, and out of Lebanon came some truly notable people, such as Papinian, born in either Tyre or Sidon, regarded as one of the great Roman jurists, who served as the chief legal advisor to Emperor Septimius Severus. The writer and historian Philo of Byblos, much of whose work is lost but is extensively quoted by later Roman writers on matters about Phoenician history and religion.
Again, how much stuff is lost to time, bro? Dude, the Canaanites. Well, I'm just gonna say Phoenicians because y'all know that's who they are. But bro, all that Phoenician work just gone. How much information would be so valuable to us that is literally lost, man? Like 90% of history is just lost, bruh. That's why I asked before, like, yo, how, like, the more you think about it, the more you realize just how behind we are as a species, because we lost most of our documentation.
Born in Tyre in 234, was one of the most eminent Neoplatonic philosophers in the world, and his work is still studied in philosophy programs today. Marinus of Tyre, born around AD 70, was a pioneering cartographer, first to assign locations to a specific latitude and longitude. He made a prediction of the circumference of the Earth that was only 17% off its actual size.
That is impressive. That is impressive.
Lebanon also became one of the early centers of Christianity in the centuries following the death of Jesus. St. Paul is recorded as having visited Tyre and Sidon, but it wasn't until the Roman banning of paganism and the direct state support for Christianity that the religion gained dominance in the region. Not long after, Marian, a Christian hermit, would gain a large following in Lebanon and Syria, which led to the establishment of the Marianite Church, the major Christian denomination in Lebanon. This Christian community was forgotten by Western Christians until the Crusaders conquered the territory, after which they re-established connection with the Catholic Church. They lived in the region under Islamic rule, maintaining a dominant presence in the northern mountains, and are one of the largest religious groups in Lebanon today. By the 7th century, constant wars between the Byzantines and the Sassanids would leave both powers highly weakened. The Sassanids made a determined push to capture the Levant, likely wishing to gain control of the lucrative shipping and trading options of the Mediterranean. They achieved their desire in 619.
The Sassy Empire.
They would not hold it for long. By 635, Lebanon, along with the entire region, was conquered by the Arabs, beginning a new chapter in history.
Oh yeah.
The first 300 years following the conquest saw a marked decline in trade, which hurt the heavily trade-reliant economy of the coastal cities. It wasn't until the rise of the Fatimid Caliphate that prosperity began to return and trade links with the West were re-established. Though Muslim caliphs directly ruled over the cities like Beirut, Tyre and Sidon, Tripoli and Byblos, and the Islamic religion spread and gained dominance under their patronage there, in the mountainous countryside, other religious sects like the Maronites were largely left alone to administer their own affairs. The language spoken was also slow to change, with the Christian communities especially continuing to use Syriac, a descendant of ancient Aramaic, into the modern period. The Syriac Orthodox Church uses a local West Syriac dialect for their liturgy, while the Maronites use Classical Syriac. But as far as I am aware, the language has died out in Lebanon as a community language. In the 11th century, the mountains would likewise serve as the refuge and power base of the Druze, a new religion that emerged from Islam and would become a major force in Lebanese history. In response to the invasion of the region by the Seljuk Turks, Pope Urban II called on Christians to reclaim the Holy Land and gave sanction to the First Crusade. They managed to capture Antioch and Jerusalem, but soon realized the military importance and likely the lucrative prospect of capturing the wealthy trading cities of the coast. By 1104, they took the Lebanese city of Byblos with the assistance of the Genoese navy, and in 1109 they expanded their control of the region by bringing Tripoli under their control. Beirut and Sidon fell the following year and were integrated into the Kingdom of Jerusalem. But Tyre, well fortified and refusing to give in, held out against King Baldwin II until 1124, when a Venetian fleet helped blockade the city, lured by the promise that they would be given trading privileges. After the city capitulated, the Venetians were given control of a third of the city and its revenues. The Maronite Christians of Lebanon supported the Crusaders, seeing them as fellow Christians. It was during this period that they entered into full communion with the Catholic Church. However, not all Christians in Lebanon followed their lead. Others still looked to the Byzantine Church of Constantinople. These would become the Greek Orthodox Church, which is the second largest Christian denomination in Lebanon today. They gained posts in the Crusader states, and some also traveled to Europe to teach languages like Syriac and Aramaic to the clergy and scholars. Lebanese.
So Aramaic is still around, and its descendant Syriac is still around in the 1200s. Damn! Wow!
Would become some of the last.
I'm just paying attention at this point, bro. Oh my goodness!
Crusader states in the late 13th century. The Mamluks took Tripoli in 1289 and Beirut, Tyre, and Sidon in 1291. They systematically dismantled the Crusader fortifications to prevent their return. But the sudden loss of trading connections with the West was economically devastating for the cities, which would take hundreds of years to recover. The following Mamluk rule was hard on Lebanon economically. The Mamluks focused on inland centers like Damascus and neglected maritime trade, possibly even seeing it as a threat. This lack of economic development likely worked to the Ottomans' advantage when they defeated the Mamluks and gained control over the region in 1516. Under the Ottomans, the cities of Tyre, Byblos, Sidon, Tripoli, and Beirut were directly administered by Ottoman officials, but much of the interior of the country would be made the Emirate of Mount Lebanon. It had semi-autonomous status, with local emirs and tax farmers running affairs. While the coastal cities were largely dominated by Sunni Muslims, much of the countryside was dominated by Christians and Druze. This allowed for the empowering and development of a local elite, but it also meant that different factions within the region would begin to struggle for power. The Druze under the Ma'an dynasty would hold the ruling power between 1516 to 1697. The Shihab dynasty would then hold power from 1697 to 1842. They were Sunni Muslim, though several of their family members converted to Maronite Christianity in the 18th century. However, under the Ottomans, the Shia communities of the south are thought to have been persecuted fairly heavily and did not hold significant representation. They belonged to the Twelver Shia community, thought to be one of the oldest Shia communities, who dwelt and still dwell on either side of the Litani River. While things in Lebanon seemed to be progressing relatively peacefully, in fact tensions were building up between the different religious communities. This didn't so much manifest as a religious conflict, but as tribal warfare over lands.
Tribal warfare in the Middle Ages is crazy.
18th century, the internal
tribal warfare in the 18th bruh, come on, get on with the times.
Lebanon were numerous and of growing intensity. Under the leadership of Bashir Shihab II, a Maronite Christian who reigned from 1789 to 1840, there would be many clashes.
Hey, Robert Hertrude from Shark Tank.
When the Egyptians under Muhammad Ali set their sights on the conquest of Syria, Bashir welcomed the annexation. Bashir's forces joined them in capturing Damascus and subsequent battles in the region. After their victory, the Egyptians consolidated and organized the Lebanese cities under Damascus, but allowed Bashir to retain control of the Emirate of Mount Lebanon, using his largely Christian forces. Yet he would not be able to maintain control for long. Muhammad Ali was modernizing and industrializing Egypt, transforming their military and economy into a serious regional power. Fearing the growth of Egypt, Great Britain, Prussia, Russia, and Austria gave their support to the Ottoman Empire and intervened militarily on their behalf twice. European and Ottoman forces.
I actually heard about this. I had a few people explain this to me in my comments when I was reacting to the Greek War of Independence. I stunned to see Egypt
started a naval
got to this point
bombardment of Beirut on September 11, 1840. Rebels who sided with the British and Ottomans then began their assaults. Beirut, Sidon, and Tyre were captured by the British and Ottoman forces by the end of September. Bashir surrendered on October 11th. In 1842, the Ottomans, apparently becoming aware of the heightening tensions between the Christians and the Druze, divided the emirate into two halves. The north was for the Maronites, the south for the Druze. The dividing line was the Damascus-Beirut highway. Yet the tensions continued to mount, and foreign powers didn't help. The British were supplying arms to the Druze, and the French, in response, were arming the Maronites. The fire was lit in 1859, with a Maronite.
Okay, so I reacted to the Armenian genocide, and I had a bunch of people telling me, and the video that I reacted to basically said that the British and basically just the West, the collective West, was funding a whole bunch of groups in the Ottoman Empire to cause a destabilization in the Ottoman Empire, which I'm actually seeing right now. So this is actually kind of validating what I heard from that video. Very interesting. I love it whenever I react to stuff and there's a connection with previous stuff that I react to. That's always nice to point out.
Revolt, led by Tanya Shahin. He was a Maronite peasant leader, but his actions were not directed specifically against the Druze or Muslims, but against Maronite feudal lords in Kaserwan. They expelled the lords, seized their lands and properties, and established a peasant republic. The act inspired others across Lebanon, but in many regions the landlords were Druze. When a large brawl between Druze and Maronites resulted in 20 fatalities, things spiraled out of control with back and forth acts of violence. By May 29, 1860, this tit-for-tat violence escalated into full-out civil war that saw militia forces of the Druze attack and burn Maronite villages. The Druze were allied with some of the rural Sunni population, who likewise participated in the attacks. The Maronites in response gathered forces and struggled to defend themselves. They suffered high casualties. When the Christians were fortified in the city of Zahla, the Druze forces disguised themselves as Christians, carrying Christian banners and crosses taken from the slain. The Christian men of Zahla welcomed them as they approached, thinking they were reinforcements that they had been expecting. The city quickly fell to them. Following this, Baalbek was also taken, and even some of its Ottoman garrison were killed when they tried to stop the attacks.
Damn!
The ethnic violence spread even to Damascus, where the Sunni population attacked the Christian quarters of the city, killing between 6,000 and 12,000 people, and destroying much of the Christian part of the city. Yet, an unexpected man would rise up to put a stop to the violence. Abd al-Qadir al-Hassani. He was an Algerian hero who fought against the French occupation of Algeria, but was also an Islamic scholar and a Sufi mystic. He lost his struggle against the French and was imprisoned in France for a time, but set free by Louis Napoleon Bonaparte. He was described by the wife of Richard Francis Burton. He dresses purely in white, enveloped.
This is the same guy that I just reacted to. I literally reacted to this guy like a couple days ago.
If you see him on horseback without knowing him to be Abd al-Qadir, you would.
Yo! That's mad. Heaven sent us a savior. Yo! Heaven sent us a freaking savior. Bro, you know you are him when people are calling you a savior sent from heaven. Straight out of heaven. Absolutely mad.
Surrounded by his Algerians, around 40 of them. He was on horseback and without arms. His handsome figure, calm and imposing, made a strange contrast with the noise and disorder that reigned everywhere. For his efforts, he won great esteem across the Western world. Abraham Lincoln gifted him inlaid pistols, Britain a golden shotgun, the Vatican
a golden shotgun for what the heck, Britain?
Gave him the Order of Pope Pius IX, and from Greece, the Grand Cross of the Redeemer. He went from being an enemy of France to a hero, given a grand welcome in Paris by Emperor Napoleon III. As the Christian population in the countryside fled to the Lebanese cities such as Beirut to seek protection, Western governments put significant pressure on the Ottomans to stop the violence. France had a very old treaty dating to 1523 with the Ottomans regarding the protection of Christians in Ottoman lands. And with the agreement of the Ottomans, they dispatched 6,000 troops to Lebanon, who arrived in Beirut in August of 1860. The Ottomans also dispatched Fuad Pasha, a senior Ottoman statesman, and invested him with full powers to end the violence. He had over 100 Druze executed for their role and worked to restore the property and lands that had been stolen from Christians. The Western powers then pressured the Ottomans for the establishment of the autonomous Mount Lebanon Mutasarrifate, which established a Maronite governor to be appointed by the Ottomans, supported by a council of leaders of the other ethnic groups, as well as designate a homeland for the Maronites. One of the finest of Lebanese men who played an oversized role throughout this era was Yosef Bey Karam from the mountain village of Eden. He was a brave and intelligent green-eyed boy, raised as a Christian. By 7, he could speak Arabic, Italian, French, and Syriac.
Yeah, because you have all these languages around you, plus your parents are probably multilingual. I mean, it's impressive nonetheless, but still, that's not really surprising to me.
He was instructed in horsemanship, swordsmanship, and shooting by his father, and became a renowned stick fighter, winning many bouts against nobles. He fought the Egyptians alongside his father, and gained a lot of prestige for his intellect and fighting skills. When ethnic strife was breaking out, he met with Muslim leaders in Tripoli and convinced them to help prevent ethnic fighting in the area. When things spiraled out of control, he raised a force of 500 and went to the seat of the Maronite Church and offered to defend them and the Maronites. When the Mutasarrifate government was established, he became increasingly dissatisfied with the rule. He insisted that Lebanon should be governed by a local, and that they should have real self-rule. This would lead to a showdown between Karam and the Ottomans. He won many battles against them, but eventually the French demanded that Karam go into exile, in exchange for the safety of him and his men. Likely realizing that the force of the Ottomans could not be overcome by his small forces alone, he agreed to the French terms, and went to Europe, and traveled extensively promoting the cause of Lebanese independence. During the 19th century, the urban centers of Lebanon were also growing and changing. Beirut became the dominant city and was closely tied to the export of silk, which Lebanon had become a major producer and exporter of. Western capital began to flow into the city. Roads were expanded. The port was highly developed, and telegraph lines were installed. Yet other traditional cities such as Sidon and Tyre, major centers during the Phoenician days, declined, becoming regional centers associated with agriculture and fishing. Tripoli in the north maintained traditional crafts, manufacturing, and exported olive oil, soap, and textiles. Zahla, which had before been just a village, expanded to become one of the largest cities in Lebanon, due in part to the silk trade. It's the third largest city in Lebanon today, inhabited predominantly by Greek Catholics. Then, the First War broke out. Ottoman troops were sent into Lebanon. They seized direct control of the region, took food supplies for their army, disrupted trade networks, and caused famine that led to the deaths of around 100,000 people over the course of the war. While that was unfolding, France and Britain were already making backroom deals as to who would claim what portions of Ottoman lands. The English got Iraq, the Persian Gulf, and Palestine. The French, Lebanon, Syria, parts of southern Turkey, and northern Iraq. And in many ways, a lot of the violence ongoing in the region today can be directly traced back to these imperial decisions.
The Sykes-Picot,
Later
agreement.
In 1920, the League of Nations gave a rubber stamp to what French and English had earlier agreed, and the French High Commissioner proclaimed Greater Lebanon. A tense stasis would continue in Lebanon until the outbreak of World War II, with the Nazi occupation of France and the establishment of the so-called Vichy government, the collaborationist French government that ruled unoccupied regions of France. This drama played out also in Syria and Lebanon, when Iraqi nationalist forces ousted the British-controlled government on April 1st, 1941.
A lot of people tend to overlook this.
They appealed for help to the Germans and Italians against the British forces. The Germans obliged, and the French authorities in Syria and Lebanon allowed Germany to move supplies and aircraft through Lebanon and Syria to aid the Iraqis. However, the Iraqis were defeated by the British Army by the end of May, and the British sent an invasion force from occupied Palestine and Iraq into Syria and Lebanon. The Australian forces, under British command, were near to capturing Beirut when on July 10, 1941, a ceasefire was negotiated and French command surrendered. The British handed over the administration to the so-called Free French. Charles de Gaulle visited Lebanon after the fighting and promised to recognize the independence of Lebanon. In 1943, the Lebanese factions representing Christians, Muslims, and Druze came together to agree on the formation of a multi-religious state. Christians agreed not to seek outside interference by Western powers and to accept the Arab and Islamic features of Lebanon. Muslims agreed not to seek unity with Syria. The president would always be a Maronite Christian, the prime minister always a Sunni Muslim. Deputy prime minister would be Greek Orthodox. This formula may have made sense at the time, given the demographics then, but it would soon lead to its own crisis. Elections were held.
Wasn't there another country? Or I might have a deja vu. I've heard of this system. I think I heard of this system in Lebanon. But I feel like there's another country in the Middle East that also uses this system to keep stability. It's either the Middle East or somewhere else. I don't know. I think it's Lebanon, and I'm just confusing myself.
Held in 1943, and shortly after, the new government of Lebanon declared an end to the mandate. However, the French refused to leave. They jailed the elected government and cracked down on dissent. Under
Classic
British
France.
pressure, they soon released the government members, but refused to leave Lebanon. Nor would they leave until 1946.
We see Britain here. We see Britain here showing up. Guys, Britain has done a lot of stuff for the sake of money, but if money isn't involved, I would say Britain is the best when it comes for force for good. As long as there's no money incentive, Britain is typically a very strong force for good. Because a lot of places, even if there's no money involved, like France, for example, they didn't care. They would still, like, for instance, go and colonize other places for the sake of prestige. Or in the case if you're France, to make any and everything French or a different reason. The British, not really. It was all just about money, money, money. If there's no money involved, usually the British were typically morally on the right side of things. If there's no money involved, of course.
And so it was that the modern state of Lebanon finally obtained full independence. But it was born into a chaotic era of intense conflict. The country descended into civil war in 1975. The complexity of the civil war, which raged between 1975 and 1990, is beyond the topic of this video, but it resulted in the deaths of around 150,000 people. From the ashes emerged Hezbollah, and a rather confusing political order that still exists in Lebanon today. I wish that the Lebanese people can come together in such times of hardship, standing tall and strong like the cedar against such terrible winds of destruction. Those grown together stand together. From the Canaanites and the mighty Phoenician Empire, the cities of Tyre, Sidon, and Byblos, as old as Stonehenge, the magical temples of Baalbek, the beautiful monasteries of the Kadisha Valley, and the Lady of Lebanon. These are yours, part of your history, sometimes fraught, sometimes tragic, divided by religion, but united through common origin and common history, dwelling between the sea and the cedars of those lofty mountains. I hope you liked the video, and if you did,
Damn, bro, I'm not even freaking Lebanese, and I feel proud, I feel patriotic as he was saying that. Oh my goodness, dude, this is such a good video. I was learning like I might honestly just like rewatch this video on my own because there was like so much detail that was just so mind-boggling that I couldn't even process them properly, man. Like this video is actually that good. Honestly, thank you for recommending me this video. If you know any other videos like this, man, that you would definitely love to see my reaction to, bro, definitely comment the video down below. Okay, this is excellent, man. If you're new to my channel, you like my reactions, make sure you like and subscribe, turn on my bell notifications. If you are an active viewer of mine and you have some suggestions for me and I haven't done them yet, consider becoming a channel member where your suggestions will be done much more quicker. And not only that, you get a whole bunch of other perks. Only 99 cents a month USD. And my channel members can attest that, you know, I'm on it. Like, you know, they are the utmost priority. Okay, they have not regret joining the channel membership, man. Okay, and you know, I'm able to see your suggestions because sometimes, guys, I get suggested something and I lose it. It gets lost because there's a bunch of people suggesting me stuff. But with channel membership, I have a specific area where my members go, they put their suggestions and I find it easily, I do it. Bam, just like that. Okay, so I highly recommend it. The link to the channel membership description, the video describing everything else is going to be in the description. Not description, but in the comments actually. But remember, check out my other reactions on my channel, man. Thank you for watching and goodbye.